I sat in my childhood dining room watching my father slide a thick envelope across the polished oak table toward my younger sister Madison. "We gave your wedding fund to your sister. She deserves a real wedding." He announced, his chest puffed with pride. My mother nodded approvingly while Madison's perfectly glossed lips curved into a triumphant smirk. $40,000. Gone. Just like that. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply turned to look at Nathan, my fiancé, who had been quietly observing from beside me. He stood slowly, pulled out his phone, and asked in the calmest voice imaginable, "Should I tell them what I do for a living?" Madison's confident smile vanished instantly. 3 years before that devastating moment, I was just another exhausted nursing student pulling double shifts at a small coffee shop near the university hospital. The morning I met Nathan, I had been on my feet for 14 hours straight, and my hands shook slightly as I prepared his simple black coffee. "Long shift?" he asked gently, noticing the textbooks scattered behind the counter. "Nursing school doesn't pay for itself," I replied, managing a tired smile. Nathan became a regular after that. Every morning at 6:30 sharp, he would arrive in his faded jeans and plain gray t-shirt, order the same black coffee, and leave a $10 tip that I tried to refuse every single time. He drove an old Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and wore shoes that had seen better days, but his kindness made him the brightest part of my early mornings. "I work at a small tech company downtown," he told me one day when I finally agreed to sit with him during my break. "Nothing fancy, just helping businesses with their computer systems." We bonded over our shared values during those brief morning conversations. Both of us believed in earning our way and finding meaning through helping others and building something real from the ground up. Nathan listened to my stories about difficult patients with genuine interest, while I found myself fascinated by his quiet passion for making technology accessible to small businesses. When he finally asked me to dinner 6 months later, I surprised myself by saying yes immediately. Our first date was at a family-owned Italian restaurant where the owner knew Nathan by name and the pasta was handmade daily. We talked until the restaurant closed, discovering we both volunteered at the same literacy center on weekends, both sent money home to help younger siblings through school, both dreamed of making a genuine difference in our communities. My family's reaction to Nathan was predictable. When I brought him home for Sunday dinner, my father barely looked up from his newspaper to shake his hand. My mother's smile was polite but cold as she took in his simple clothing and modest demeanor. "So, you work with computers?" she asked, her tone suggesting she'd rather be discussing anything else. "I help small businesses implement secure systems," Nathan explained. "It's rewarding work." Madison, home from her marketing job at a high-end boutique, didn't even try to hide her disdain. "Lucy always did have humble tastes," she said, examining her manicured nails. The contrast became more obvious when Madison introduced Preston 2 weeks later. He arrived in a BMW wearing a designer suit and a watch that probably cost more than Nathan's car. He worked in real estate, he announced, within minutes, selling luxury properties to exclusive clients. My parents were instantly charmed. "Now here's a man with ambition," my father said, clapping Preston on the back. Preston regaled them with stories of million-dollar deals and celebrity clients, while Nathan sat quietly beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. Later, as we drove home in his Honda, Nathan asked if I was okay. "They've always preferred Madison," I admitted. "She was the pretty one, the popular one. I was just the bookworm who wanted to help people." "Their loss," Nathan said simply. "I happen to think nurses are the real heroes." We'd been dating for a year when Nathan proposed. It wasn't fancy or elaborate. We were volunteering at the literacy center, teaching elderly residents basic computer skills. When Mrs. Chen mentioned she wished her granddaughter could see how happy she was learning to video call. "Everyone deserves to connect with the people they love," Nathan said, helping her position the tablet. Then he turned to me. "Lucy, you make me want to be better every single day. Will you marry me?" He pulled out a simple solitaire ring, classic and elegant without being ostentatious. Through happy tears, I said yes, while a dozen seniors cheered, and Mrs. Chen immediately video called her granddaughter to share the news. My parents' reaction was lukewarm at best. "Are you sure you don't want to wait?" my mother asked. "See what else is out there." "Nathan is everything I want," I told them firmly. "Well, I suppose we'll honor our promise," my father said with a sigh. $40,000 for each daughter's wedding, as we've always said. That promise had been made when Madison and I were teenagers, a way to ensure we could both have the weddings of our dreams. I had never forgotten it, especially during the lean years of nursing school when every dollar counted. Nathan and I began planning our modest celebration with joy. We wanted a simple ceremony in Riverside Park where we'd shared our first kiss, followed by a reception at the community center where we volunteered. Our guest list included the seniors from the literacy program, my nursing colleagues, Nathan's coworkers, and the families we'd grown close to through our volunteer work. "We could do something bigger with your parents' gift," Nathan suggested one evening as we reviewed our budget. "I'd rather save most of it for a house down payment," I said. "Our wedding should reflect who we are, not what others expect." Nathan pulled me close. "Have I told you lately that I love your practical heart?" We saved diligently, each contributing what we could from our paychecks. Nathan matched my contributions dollar for dollar, though I noticed he often skipped lunches and wore the same clothes repeatedly. When I expressed concern, he just smiled. "Building our future is worth more than sandwiches," he said. Madison announced her engagement to Preston 6 months after ours, but the difference in our family's reactions was stark. Where they had sighed over our simple ring, they gushed over Madison's massive diamond. Where they questioned our modest plans, they immediately began discussing Madison's society wedding. Finally, a wedding that will make the family proud. I overheard my mother telling her sister on the phone. The favoritism hurt, but Nathan helped me focus on what mattered. We spent our evenings planning not just our wedding, but our life together. We wanted to buy a small house near the hospital where I worked, start a family within a few years, continue our volunteer work, and maybe expand Nathan's helpful technology services to nonprofits at reduced rates. "Your family doesn't define your worth," Nathan reminded me during particularly difficult family gatherings. "Your compassion does. Your dedication does. The way you light up when you talk about your patients does." As Madison's wedding planning kicked into high gear, the divide in our family became even more obvious. She was taken to designer dress shops while I happily found a beautiful gown at a consignment store. She toured exclusive venues while Nathan and I met with the park's event coordinator. She tasted cakes at expensive bakeries while we asked Mrs. Chen if she'd share her famous recipe. But I was genuinely happy. Every decision Nathan and I made together strengthened our bond. We weren't just planning a wedding, we were building a foundation for a lifetime of shared values and mutual respect. "I can't wait to marry you," I told Nathan one evening as we addressed invitations by hand. "Even without the country club and the designer, everything," he teased gently. "Especially without all that," I assured him. "I want to marry you, not put on a show." As the months passed and both weddings approached, I held on to the security of knowing my parents' promised funds would cover our simple celebration and leave plenty for our future. I had no idea that behind their polite smiles and half-hearted interest in our plans, my parents were already orchestrating a betrayal that would change everything. But even if I had known, I don't think I would have done anything differently. Because every modest choice Nathan and I made, every dollar we saved, every volunteer shift we worked together, was weaving us into an unbreakable team. We were building something real while Madison and Preston were constructing an elaborate facade. The storm was coming, but our foundation was solid, and sometimes that makes all the difference. 6 months before that fateful dining room confrontation, Madison's engagement announcement shattered any remaining illusions I had about my place in our family. She didn't just share the news. She orchestrated a spectacular engagement party at the Rosewood Country Club, the kind of event that required engraved invitations and a strict dress code. My invitation must have gotten lost in the mail. At least that's what my mother claimed when I asked about it 3 weeks after seeing the photos plastered across Madison's social media. "Oh, honey, you know how scatterbrained your sister can be with details," my mother said, not meeting my eyes. "Besides, it was mostly Preston's business associates. You wouldn't have enjoyed it." Nathan found me crying in our apartment that night, holding my phone with its screen full of images showing my entire extended family toasting Madison and Preston. Even distant cousins I hadn't seen in years had made the exclusive guest list. "They didn't forget you," Nathan said quietly, holding me as I sobbed. "They chose not to include you. There's a difference, and I think it's important we acknowledge that." He was right, of course. The purposeful exclusion stung more than any oversight could have, but what happened next made that party's snub seem almost trivial in comparison. Preston's proposal story became the stuff of family legend overnight. He had arranged for a private sunset viewing at the Rosewood, complete with a string quartet and champagne fountain. The ring, as Madison breathlessly told anyone who would listen, was a 3-carat cushion, cut surrounded by diamonds custom designed by a jeweler who usually worked with Hollywood celebrities. The price tag, whispered but never directly stated, was rumored to be around $50,000. "Isn't it gorgeous?" Madison asked, thrusting her hand in my face during a mandatory family dinner. "Preston says a woman's ring should reflect her value." I looked at my own modest solitaire, the one Nathan had saved for months to afford, and felt nothing but love for the man who had chosen it with such care. "I think a ring should reflect the love between two people," I replied. Madison's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, Lucy, you're so adorably naive." As the weeks progressed, I threw myself into my own wedding planning with renewed determination. If my family wanted to obsess over Madison's extravaganza, Nathan and I would quietly create something meaningful without their input or approval. We booked the park pavilion arranged for folding chairs from the community center and asked the literacy program's photography club if they'd like to practice their skills at our ceremony. But small things began to trouble me. My mother, who had shown zero interest in my wedding dress shopping, suddenly became Madison's constant companion on trips to exclusive bridal boutiques. They would return with bags from stores I'd never even heard of, whispering and giggling like schoolgirls with secrets. Then came the phone calls. I started noticing my mother stepping out to take calls during family dinners, speaking in hushed tones about deposits and payments. Once I heard her mention a figure that made my stomach drop. $30,000 should cover the initial payment. "Planning something special?" I asked when she returned to the table. "Just some house renovations," she said quickly, too quickly. The real blow came from an unexpected source. My childhood friend Emma had taken a job at Grandview Estate, the most exclusive wedding venue in the state. We met for coffee one afternoon and her excitement was palpable. "You'll never guess what happened yesterday," she gushed. "I processed a massive deposit for a wedding next spring. $30,000 just for the venue. Can you imagine?" I laughed along, thinking of my own $200 park reservation. Must be nice to have that kind of money. Emma's face suddenly went pale. "Oh God, Lucy, I shouldn't be telling you this. Client confidentiality and all that." "It's fine," I assured her. "I don't know anyone getting married at Grandview." She bit her lip, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Actually, you do. The bride's name was Madison. Madison with your last name." The coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers, spreading a dark stain across the cafe table. Emma grabbed napkins, apologizing profusely, but I barely heard her. $30,000. Just for the venue. Where had my parents gotten that kind of money? I confronted my mother that evening, fighting to keep my voice steady. Emma mentioned seeing Madison's name on a booking at Grandview Estate. My mother's face went through several expressions before settling on indignation. That girl had no right to share confidential information. I should report her. "That's not the point, Mom. How are you affording this?" "Your father got a bonus at work," she said, busying herself with dishes that were already clean. "We want Madison's wedding to be special. And mine." The question hung between us like a blade. "Yours will be special too in its own way. You've always been so good at making do with less. Making do with less. The phrase echoed in my mind for days afterward. Is that how they saw me? The daughter who could make do while Madison got the best of everything. Nathan noticed my growing distress. He started suggesting alternatives, gentle ways to protect my heart from the mounting evidence of my family's favoritism. "We could elope," he offered one evening as I stressed over the latest family slight. "Just you and me, maybe your grandmother as a witness." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going to let them take this from us, too. We're having our wedding, and it's going to be beautiful." But privately, doubts crept in. I found myself checking my parents' social media, obsessively looking for clues about their financial situation. That's when I spotted a photo my father had posted of their house with a construction crew in the background. "Exciting renovations beginning," the caption read. I called my grandmother immediately. At 82, Grandma Rose was sharp as a tack and the only family member who had ever truly seen me for who I was. "Renovations," she said, sounding puzzled. "Your mother just had the kitchen redone 2 years ago. What could they possibly be renovating?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Lucy, dear, I don't want to alarm you, but I overheard something at lunch last week. Your parents were discussing taking out a loan. Your mother mentioned it was for family investments." My blood ran cold. "What kind of investments?" She wouldn't say, but she did mention something about ensuring Madison's happiness. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture I didn't want to see. But I needed proof before I could confront them again. That's when Nathan surprised me with his own revelation. "I've been noticing some unusual activity too," he admitted one night. "Remember when I helped your dad set up online banking last year? He forgot to log out on my laptop once. I haven't looked, but the browser saved his password." "Nathan, we can't invade his privacy like that." "No, we can't," he agreed. "But Lucy, I have a bad feeling about all of this. The construction crews the venue deposits the loans. I think you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that your wedding fund might not be as secure as you think." I wanted to argue to defend my parents despite all evidence to the contrary, but deep down I knew Nathan was right. The signs were all there, bright as neon warnings. My parents were spending massive amounts of money on Madison's wedding while lying to me about it. At the next family dinner, I watched them all with new eyes. Madison chatted animatedly about floral arrangements that cost more than a month of my rent. Preston bragged about the band he'd booked famous musicians who commanded 5-figure fees. My parents hung on every word, their faces glowing with pride. "What about your wedding plans, Lucy?" my grandmother asked pointedly. "I haven't heard much about them lately." "Oh, Lucy," Madison jumped in before I could answer. "She's doing something small, quaint. It's sweet, really." "There's nothing wrong with an intimate celebration," Grandma Rose said firmly. "Some of the best marriages I've known started with simple weddings." "Of course," my mother said with a condescending smile. "Lucy's wedding will be perfectly adequate." Nathan's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. But this time, even his quiet support couldn't ease the growing knot in my stomach, because I was starting to understand that my parents weren't just favoring Madison. They were actively sabotaging my future to do it. After dinner, Grandma Rose pulled me aside in the hallway. "Something's not right here," she whispered urgently. "I heard your parents talking when they thought I was napping. They mentioned your wedding fund, Lucy. They said something about it being already allocated." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I feared I already knew. "I think you need to ask them directly, and soon, before it's too late." As Nathan drove us home that night, I stared out at the city lights blurring past the window. My perfect family was revealing itself to be built on lies and favoritism, and my wedding fund, the promise that had sustained me through years of hard work and sacrifice, was disappearing like smoke. "Whatever happens," Nathan said quietly, "we'll face it together. Your family's money can't buy what we have." He was right, but that didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. And the worst part, this was only the beginning. The real shock was still to come, waiting for me in that dining room where my father would hand over my dreams to my sister with a smile on his face. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that the ground beneath my feet was shifting, and the family I had tried so hard to please was showing me exactly where I stood in their hierarchy of love. 2 months before everything exploded in that dining room, the true nature of Madison's wedding preparations became impossible to ignore. What had started as an elegant celebration had morphed into a spectacle of excess that would make royalty blush. Every family gathering became a stage for Madison to unveil her latest extravagant decision, while Preston stood smugly beside her, his arm possessively around her waist. "We've decided on ice sculptures for every table," Madison announced during Sunday brunch, sliding glossy photos across the table. "Each one will be a different scene from our love story. The artist usually only works with celebrities, but Preston pulled some strings." I stared at the quoted price visible in the corner of one photo, $8,000 for ice that would melt. "How wonderful," my mother cooed. "Preston, you really do have the best connections." Preston's smile reminded me of a shark circling prey. "In my business, relationships are everything. Speaking of which, I just closed a deal on a beachfront property. The commission alone could buy your entire wedding, Lucy." The insult was delivered with practiced ease disguised as casual conversation. Nathan's jaw tightened beside me, but he maintained his composure. He had developed an unsettling habit lately of observing Preston with intense focus, like a scientist studying a specimen. "Congratulations," Nathan said evenly. "The real estate market can be volatile. I hope your success continues." Something flickered in Preston's eyes, a brief uncertainty before his salesman's smile returned. "Oh, I'm not worried. I've got plenty more deals in the pipeline." Madison's transformation into what could only be called a bridezilla was complete by this point. The sweet sister I remembered from childhood had vanished, replaced by someone who threw tantrums over napkin shades and reduced vendors to tears with her demands. I witnessed one such meltdown at the florist when I stopped by to confirm my own simple order of wildflowers. Madison was screaming at the poor woman about the wrong shade of ivory in the rose petals. I said pearl ivory, not cream ivory. "Are you completely incompetent? Do you know how much we're paying you?" The florist, Mrs. Patterson, who had done arrangements for the community for 30 years, was near tears. I intervened, gently pulling Madison aside. "They're flowers, Madison. They'll be beautiful regardless." She whirled on me, her perfectly contoured face twisted with rage. "Of course you'd say that. You're having grocery store daisies at your pathetic park wedding. Some of us have standards." The venom in her voice shocked me. This wasn't sibling rivalry anymore. This was pure contempt. As I left the shop, Mrs. Patterson touched my arm. "Your wildflower bouquet will be lovely, dear," she whispered. "And that young man of yours looks at you like you hung the moon. That's worth more than all the pearl ivory roses in the world." The financial hemorrhaging became more obvious by the day. My father, who had always been meticulous about money, started looking haggard. I found him one evening hunched over papers at his desk, calculator in hand, sweat beading on his forehead. "Everything okay, Dad?" He jerked up quickly, shuffling the papers into a drawer. Fine, just some work stuff." But I had glimpsed enough. The letterhead from Home Equity Loans, the stamped "Approved" in red ink, the figure that made my heart sink, $75,000. "Dad, if you're having money troubles, maybe Madison should scale back the wedding." His face hardened. "Your sister deserves the best. We've always provided for our children." "All your children." The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Don't be selfish, Lucy. You've always been jealous of Madison's success." "Success?" I wanted to scream. I was a registered nurse saving lives while Madison sold overpriced handbags to bored housewives. But I bit my tongue, as always, the good daughter who made do with less. Nathan and I continued our modest planning, though each vendor meeting now came with sympathetic looks when they learned my last name. "Oh, you're Madison's sister," the cake baker exclaimed. "She ordered the 7-tier castle replica. What were you thinking for yours? A simple 2-tier chocolate cake, I replied, ignoring her poorly hidden surprise. How classic she managed. The true extent of my parents' financial deception began revealing itself in small ways. Mail started arriving marked urgent and final notice. My mother usually composed snapped at the mailman for delivering bills. My father began working weekends, something he hadn't done in 20 years. During one particularly tense family dinner, the subject of wedding contributions arose. Madison was detailing her need for a makeup artist who had worked with Broadway stars when my grandmother innocently asked about the budget. Well, with Lucy's fund and ours combined, we're managing beautifully, my mother said smoothly. The words hit me like physical blows. Combined? Oh, did I say combined? I meant compared. Comparing the two weddings. But the damage was done. Nathan reached for my hand under the table, and this time his touch couldn't calm the storm building inside me. After dinner, I cornered my father in his study. I need to know about my wedding fund, the $40,000 you promised. He wouldn't meet my eyes. It's all there, Lucy. Don't worry about it. Then why are you taking out home equity loans? His face flushed red. You've been snooping. How dare you? How dare I? You're mortgaging your retirement for Madison's circus of a wedding while lying to me about my fund. That money is for renovations, he insisted, but the lie was transparent now. Show me the account then. Prove the money's there. I don't need to prove anything to you. When it's time for your wedding, you'll get what you deserve. What I deserved. The words echoed with ominous promise. My grandmother, bless her heart, tried to be my detective. At 82, she was still sharp and had noticed the same troubling signs. She called me one evening with disturbing news. I overheard your parents on the phone with Madison's wedding planner. Lucy, they're discussing payments of over $100,000 total. Where is that money coming from? I wish I knew Grandma. There's more. I heard your mother mention that you had chosen a simple wedding anyway, so redirecting the funds made sense. Redirecting. Not borrowing, not sharing, redirecting, as if my money had already found a new destination. Nathan's protective instincts had kicked into overdrive. He started documenting everything, taking photos of mail left on counters, screenshot social media posts about wedding expenses, even recording Preston's increasingly grandiose brags about his business success. Why are you collecting all this? I asked one night, finding him organizing files on his laptop. Call it a hunch, he said carefully. Preston bothers me. His math doesn't add up. What do you mean? He claims to sell luxury properties, but I've never seen him actually work. He's always available for lunch, always shopping, always planning this wedding. When does he actually sell houses? It was a good point. Preston seemed to exist solely to flash money and make others feel inferior. But questioning him in my family was tantamount to treason. Madison had found her prince, and we were all expected to bow accordingly. The breaking point came when I discovered my parents had given Madison my grandmother's wedding china, a set that was supposed to come to me as the eldest granddaughter. I found out accidentally when Madison posted photos of her something borrowed on Instagram. That was promised to Lucy, Grandma Rose said firmly when I called her in tears. Madison says Mom gave it to her, said I wouldn't appreciate it properly. This has gone too far. I'm coming to that dinner they're planning, and I'm going to set things straight. The dinner she referred to was supposedly to discuss final wedding preparations for both marriages. Nathan and I both knew it would be another Madison showcase, but we agreed to attend. Nathan seemed almost eager, which puzzled me. Maybe it's time for some truth, he said cryptically. As the date approached, Nathan's behavior became increasingly interesting. He made mysterious phone calls, met with someone he described only as a colleague, and spent hours researching something on his computer. What are you planning? I asked. Insurance, he replied, just in case your family tries to gaslight you about the money. I should have pressed harder, should have demanded answers. But part of me was afraid to know what Nathan was discovering, because if my suspicions were right, my parents hadn't just favored Madison. They had actively stolen from me to fund her fantasy. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter every illusion about my family. The facades were crumbling, the lies were piling up, and the truth was about to explode in that dining room with all the force of a bomb. But even knowing what was coming couldn't have prepared me for the devastation of hearing my father proudly announce that he had given away my future, or for the shocking revelations that would follow when Nathan finally decided to show his cards. The ground was shifting beneath our feet and the earthquake was about to hit. The dining room felt smaller than I remembered as we gathered for what my parents had called a final wedding planning discussion. The mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the overhead chandelier's light in fractured patterns that seemed to mirror the fractures in our family. I sat between Nathan and my grandmother, drawing strength from their presence as my parents bustled about with barely contained excitement. Madison swept in, fashionably late Preston trailing behind her like an expensive accessory. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, her engagement ring catching the light with every practiced gesture. They took their seats across from us, Madison's smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Thank you all for coming." My father began standing at the head of the table like he was about to deliver a corporate presentation. "We have some wonderful news about the wedding arrangements." My mother beamed beside him, clutching a thick manila envelope, the same type of envelope I'd imagined receiving countless times, holding the check that would help Nathan and I start our married life together, $40,000. The promise that had sustained me through grueling night shifts and exhausting study sessions. "As you know," my father continued, his voice swelling with pride, "we've always believed in supporting our daughter's dreams. Madison has worked so hard to create a wedding that will truly represent our family's standing in the community." Nathan's hand found mine under the table. His touch was steady grounding, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. "Which is why." My father reached for the envelope, sliding it across the polished surface toward Madison. "We've decided to give Madison the full amount of both wedding funds, $80,000 total. She deserves a real wedding." The words hung in the air like poison gas. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room tilted slightly and I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "Lucy has always been practical," my mother added quickly, her smile never wavering. "She chose a simple wedding, so it only makes sense to allocate the resources where they're truly needed." Allocate the resources. As if my dreams were just numbers on a spreadsheet to be shuffled around at will. Madison reached for the envelope with perfectly manicured fingers, her expression one of false surprise. "Oh, Mom, Dad, you shouldn't have. But if Lucy doesn't mind..." She turned to me with mock concern, but her eyes glittered with triumph. This had been planned, orchestrated. They'd all known walking into this room, and I was the only fool who'd still believed in fairness. Preston leaned back in his chair, smirking. "It's really generous of you, Lucy. Some people understand their place in the family hierarchy." The condescension in his voice finally broke through my shock. I felt the familiar urge to shrink to accept to be the good daughter who made do with less. But then I looked at Nathan. He was completely calm, eerily calm, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. "Should I tell them what I do for a living?" he asked quietly, pulling out his phone. The question seemed to electrify the room. Madison's hand froze halfway to the envelope. Preston's smirk faltered. My parents exchanged confused glances. "We know what you do," my mother said dismissively. "You work with computers at some small company." "That's one way to put it," Nathan said, his fingers moving across his phone screen. "Another way would be to say I'm the founder and CEO of Sentinel Security Systems." The name meant nothing to my family, but I saw Preston go very still. "I never heard of it," Madison said, but her voice had lost its edge. "We specialize in cybersecurity for financial institutions," Nathan continued conversationally. "Identity protection, fraud, prevention, that sort of thing. It's been quite successful. In fact, we just completed our acquisition." Acquisition. The word came from Preston sharp and worried. Nathan looked up from his phone, meeting Preston's eyes directly. Quantum Financial bought us out. $50 million. The deal closed last week. The silence was deafening. I stared at Nathan, this man I thought I knew everything about. $50 million. He still wore the same faded jeans, still drove the Honda with the cracked windshield. That's impossible, my father sputtered. You live in a one-bedroom apartment. You wear clothes from Target. Nathan supplied helpfully. Yes, I do. Amazing how much you can learn about people when they think you have nothing to offer. Isn't that right, Preston? Preston's face had gone the color of curdled milk. I don't know what you're implying. Don't you? Nathan turned his phone around, displaying what looked like financial documents. Because according to these bankruptcy filings, you know quite a lot about keeping up appearances. Tell me, does Madison know about the 3 lawsuits pending against you for real estate fraud? Madison's perfectly composed mask cracked. What are you talking about? Or the gambling debts. Nathan continued scrolling through his phone. $197,000 to various casinos in Atlantic City. They're getting impatient, aren't they, Preston? You're lying. Preston stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is all jealousy because Madison chose me. Chose you? Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in it. She chose an illusion. That BMW leased under a fake company name. The Rolex purchased with a credit card that's been frozen for non-payment. The engagement ring. He looked at Madison with something almost like pity. Due to be repossessed next week. The jeweler's been trying to contact you, Preston, but you keep dodging their calls. Madison's hand went instinctively to her ring, her face cycling through disbelief, rage, and fear. Preston, tell him he's wrong. But Preston couldn't. His salesman's swagger had evaporated, leaving behind a desperate man whose con was unraveling. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, like a fish gasping for air. The really interesting part, Nathan continued, his voice still terrifyingly calm, is what I found when I did a deeper dive. You've been trying to access my financial accounts, Preston. Keyword trying. Our security system flagged multiple attempts to reset passwords using stolen personal information. Information you could only have gotten from this family. Nathan, I finally found my voice. How long have you known all this? He turned to me, and for the first time since this bomb went off, his expression softened. I've suspected Preston was a fraud since the day I met him, but I started investigating seriously when your parents began hemorrhaging money for this wedding. I wanted to make sure you were protected. Protected from what? My mother demanded, still clinging to denial. From giving your life savings to a con artist, Nathan said bluntly. Every vendor Preston arranged for the wedding, they're being paid directly by you. He doesn't have a penny to his name. Less than a penny, actually. He's drowning in debt and saw Madison as his life raft. This is ridiculous. Madison stood, but her voice shook. Preston, show them your bank statements. Show them the property deals. Preston's response was to grab his jacket and head for the door. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do. Nathan's voice stopped him cold. My lawyer sent you a cease and desist letter this morning. If you make one more attempt to access my accounts or use my personal information, criminal charges will be filed. The FBI takes identity theft very seriously, especially when it crosses state lines. Preston's face went from pale to gray. Without another word, he fled the front door, slamming behind him with a finality that echoed through the house. Madison sank back into her chair, staring at her engagement ring like it had transformed into a snake. The silence stretched until my grandmother, who had been quietly observing everything, began to chuckle. Well, she said, satisfaction evident in every word. That was worth the price of admission. Mother, this isn't funny. My father snapped, but he looked shaken. Nathan, if what you're saying is true, every word is documented. Nathan assured him. I have copies of everything if you'd like to verify. You've been lying to us, my mother accused, but the accusation fell flat. They were the ones who'd been lying, and everyone in the room knew it. "I never lied," Nathan said simply. "You never asked. You assumed because I live modestly that I had nothing. You treated Lucy as less than because she chose substance over style. You gave away her future to fund a fantasy built on fraud. We didn't know Preston was a criminal." Nathan supplied. "No, you didn't, because you were too blinded by his performance to look deeper, just like you've been too blinded by your favoritism to see Lucy's worth." My grandmother stood then, and despite her age, she commanded the room's attention. "I have something to add to this enlightening evening." She pulled out her own envelope, but this one was legal-sized and official-looking. "I've been watching this family's dysfunction for years, watching how you've treated Lucy versus Madison. I kept hoping you'd see the error of your ways." "Mother, please—" My father started, but she silenced him with a look. "I'm worth considerably more than you know," she continued. "Harold's patents were worth millions, and I've invested wisely. I had planned to leave everything equally divided." She paused, looking at each family member in turn. "But that's changed." She handed the envelope to me. "This is a copy of my new will. Lucy inherits everything. The house in Vermont, the investment portfolio, all of it. Approximately $10 million. The room exploded. My mother gasped. My father's face went purple. Madison let out a wail that probably shattered glass in the next county. "You can't do this," Madison shrieked. "I'm your granddaughter, too." "Yes," Grandma Rose said calmly, "but you're a granddaughter who stood by while your parents stole from your sister, who flaunted your excess while she worked double shifts to save for her modest wedding, who chose a con artist over common sense." "We'll contest it," my father threatened. "Try," Grandma Rose said with steel in her voice. "I have years of documentation. Every favoritism, every slight, every redirected fund, including—" She looked directly at my parents. "The fact that you spent Lucy's entire wedding fund plus another $40,000 on Madison's farce of a wedding." I found my voice finally. "The whole fund, all $40,000. My parents' guilty silence was answer enough. Nathan squeezed my hand, and I realized I wasn't devastated. I was free. Free from trying to earn their approval. Free from accepting less than. Free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my entire life. "We should go," Nathan said quietly. As we stood to leave, Madison grabbed my arm. "Lucy, please. You can't let him do this to me. We're sisters." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Beneath the designer makeup and expensive clothes, she looked lost. The golden child discovering her pedestal was made of fool's gold. "We are sisters," I agreed, "which is why I'm going to give you some advice. Figure out who you are without the show. It might be the making of you." We left them there in the ruins of their own making. My parents faced with a mortgage they couldn't afford for a wedding that would never happen. Madison with a worthless ring and a shattered illusion. And Preston, somewhere in the night, running from debts that would eventually catch him. As Nathan drove us home, I had a million questions, but only one mattered in that moment. "Why didn't you tell me about the money?" He glanced at me, a small smile playing at his lips. "Because I wanted to be sure you loved me for me, just like I love you for you. The nurse who reads to elderly patients on her breaks, who volunteers every weekend, who sees the best in people even when they don't deserve it. $50 million, Nathan. That's not something you just forget to mention." "Would it have changed anything?" he asked seriously. "Would you have let me pay for the wedding? Would you have stopped worrying about every penny?" I thought about it honestly. No, probably not. Exactly. We built our relationship on truth, not bank balances. Your family just proved what happens when you value the latter over the former. We drove in comfortable silence after that, processing everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't bother to check. The family I'd tried so hard to please had shown their true colors, and I was done painting myself into their distorted picture. But as one door closed, another opened. I had Nathan who'd protected me while respecting my independence. I had Grandma Rose who'd seen my worth when others couldn't, and I had myself finally free from the weight of being the daughter who made do with less. The revelation in that dining room had changed everything, but the biggest revelation was this: I'd never needed their money or their approval. I'd already won the lottery the day I met a quiet man in a coffee shop who saw my worth in ways my family never could. The best part: this was only the beginning of their downfall and my rise. The dining room erupted into chaos the moment Preston fled. Madison sat frozen, staring at the doorway he'd escaped through her face, a canvas of disbelief and growing rage. My parents looked like they'd been hit by a freight train, their carefully constructed world of appearances crumbling around them, but Nathan wasn't finished, not even close. "Before we leave," Nathan said, his voice cutting through Madison's building sobs, "there are a few more things you should know." He pulled up something on his phone, and I recognized the interface of a financial tracking app. Preston's debt is actually worse than I initially stated: the gambling debts. They're to some very unforgiving people, the kind who don't accept bankruptcy as an excuse. "You're enjoying this," my mother accused, her voice shrill, "destroying Madison's happiness." "I'm preventing a crime," Nathan corrected. "Preston wasn't just coming for your money. He'd already started. Madison, check your credit cards." Madison fumbled for her purse with shaking hands, pulling out her wallet. "They're all here. Check the statements online, particularly the emergency card you keep for shopping emergencies." I watched my sister's face transform as she logged into her banking app. The color drained from her cheeks as she scrolled. $10,000, transferred yesterday to an account I don't recognize. That would be his bookie in Atlantic City. Preston's been using your information to pay down his debts. You're lucky I caught it early. My security system flagged the suspicious activity when he tried to do the same to me. "I'll call the police," Madison said, reaching for her phone with trembling fingers. "Already done," Nathan informed her. "My lawyer filed a report this morning. They'll want to speak with you about pressing charges." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough, you've made your point. You're rich. Preston's a fraud, we get it. Are you satisfied?" Nathan looked at him with genuine puzzlement. "Satisfied you stole $40,000 from your daughter to give to a con artist, and you think this is about my satisfaction?" "We didn't steal anything," my mother protested. "The money was for family. Madison is family. So is Lucy. Or did you forget that when you were writing checks for ice sculptures?" It was my grandmother who raised her hand, calling for silence with the authority of a family matriarch. "Speaking of financial revelations, I have one more." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small recording device. My mother gasped. "You've been recording us for the past 6 months," Grandma Rose confirmed without an ounce of shame. "Ever since I realized you were planning to cheat Lucy. Would you like to hear some highlights?" Before anyone could object, she pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. "Lucy won't make a fuss. She never does. We'll give her some story about the money being tied up in investments." Then my mother, "Madison needs this wedding. Lucy will understand. She's always been the practical one." Madison's voice laughing, "Lucy actually thinks she's getting that money, as if she'd know what to do with it anyway." The recording clicked off. The silence was deafening. "There's more," Grandma Rose said quietly. "Hours of it, including discussions about taking out loans, forging Lucy's signature on a credit application, and my personal favorite, planning to blame the missing money on a banking error." "You set us up," my father said, but the accusation lacked heat. He looked defeated. "No," Grandma Rose replied firmly. "You set yourselves up. I just made sure there was evidence." Nathan stood then, helping me to my feet. "There's one more thing, Lucy. I know you wanted to handle this yourself, but I think you should know. Your parents didn't just take your wedding fund. They also cashed out the bonds your grandfather left you, another $20,000. The room spun. Those bonds were supposed to be untouchable, a safety net my grandfather had created before he died. How they were in my name. Your father has a friend at the bank. They pushed through the paperwork claiming you'd authorized it. I have copies of the forged signatures. This time, the rage that filled me was pure and clean. No more hurt, no more confusion, just crystalline anger at the depth of their betrayal. You stole $60,000 from me, your own daughter. My mother had the audacity to look offended. Stole is such an ugly word. We were investing in the family's future. In Madison's future, I corrected. Always Madison, the pretty one, the social one, the one who represented the family properly. You never cared about status, Madison said weakly. You always said love was more important than money. It is, but that doesn't give you the right to steal what I earned, what I saved, what I was promised. Nathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Perfect timing. Preston just tried to board a flight to Miami. He's been detained by airport security. Apparently, he was traveling under an alias. Madison let out a wail that would have been heartbreaking if I had any sympathy left. How could I have been so stupid? You weren't stupid, I found myself saying. You were greedy. You wanted the fairy tale so badly you didn't care if it was real, and Mom and Dad were so desperate to give it to you they became criminals. We're not criminals, my father protested. Fraud, forgery, and theft. Nathan listed calmly. All felonies, all documented, all reported to the appropriate authorities as of this morning. The blood drained from my parents' faces as the reality hit them. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was legal consequences. You wouldn't, my mother whispered. Lucy, you wouldn't let him destroy your own parents. I'm not destroying anyone. You did that yourselves when you decided I was worth less than Madison's designer flowers. Grandma Rose stood again, gathering her purse with dignity. I'll be moving to the Vermont house next month. Lucy, you and Nathan are welcome to visit any time. The rest of you are not. Mother, you can't cut us off like this, my father pleaded. Watch me, she said simply. I've enabled this dysfunction for too long, hoping you'd grow out of it. But you're in your 60s, and you're still playing favorites like children dividing candy. I'm done. As we prepared to leave, Madison grabbed my hand. Lucy, please. I know I've been awful, but we're sisters. I need your help. The wedding, the vendors, they're all expecting payment. I looked at our joined hands, remembering all the times she'd been chosen over me, all the celebrations I'd been excluded from, all the achievements that were dismissed because they weren't glamorous enough. Cancel the wedding, I said simply. Return what you can, get a job. A real job, not playing dress-up at a boutique. Learn what it means to earn something instead of expecting it to be handed to you. But the deposits are gone. Just like my wedding fund, just like my bonds. Consider it a $60,000 lesson in consequences. Nathan and I left then, walking out of my childhood home for what I knew would be the last time. Behind us, I could hear my mother sobbing, my father shouting, Madison wailing. The sound of a family built on illusions finally facing reality. In the car, Nathan took my hand. Are you okay? I should be devastated, I said honestly. They stole everything, but all I feel is free. The money doesn't matter. We have more than enough. What matters is that you finally see them clearly. All those years of trying to earn their approval, of accepting scraps while Madison got feasts. And for what? They never loved me. Not really. They loved the idea of a daughter who never complained, never demanded, never expected equality. Their loss, Nathan said firmly, because the woman I'm marrying is worth 100 Madisons, 1,000. You save lives, Lucy. You bring comfort to the dying and hope to the sick. You volunteer your free time to teach others. You're the richest person I know, and it has nothing to do with money. As we drove toward our apartment, my phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts I ignored. The family that had ignored me for years suddenly needed my attention, my forgiveness, my help. But I was done being the good daughter who made do with less. What happens now? I asked Nathan. With the forgery charges, That's up to the district attorney, but with the evidence we've provided, your parents will likely face serious consequences. Restitution at minimum, possible jail time at maximum. And Madison. Depends on if she presses charges against Preston. If she doesn't, she's just another victim of a con. If she does, she might recover some of the money he stole. I thought about my sister sitting in that dining room with her worthless ring and shattered dreams. Despite everything, I hoped she'd find the strength to rebuild, to become someone real instead of the porcelain doll our parents had created. You know what the ironic part is? I said as we pulled into our parking spot. If they'd just been honest, you probably would have helped with the wedding. The real you, not the version they dismissed. Nathan laughed, but it was sad. You're right, I would have. Because it would have made you happy. But they couldn't see past their own prejudices to realize what they were throwing away. As we climbed the stairs to our apartment, I felt lighter with each step. The weight of family expectations, of never being enough, of accepting less than I deserved, all of it was falling away. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and statements and probably more family drama. But tonight I was just Lucy, loved by a man who saw my worth when my own family couldn't. The counterattack had been devastating, revealing not just Preston's crimes, but the deeper corruption of favoritism and greed that had poisoned my family. But sometimes destruction is necessary for rebuilding. Sometimes you have to burn down the rotten structure to build something clean and strong in its place. As Nathan unlocked our door, I realized I wasn't the daughter who made do with less anymore. I was the woman who demanded what she deserved, and what I deserved was so much more than they had ever been willing to give. The aftermath of that explosive dinner unfolded like a slow-motion catastrophe over the following weeks. What had begun as my parents' dream of a society wedding transformed into a nightmare that consumed everything they'd built over 40 years of marriage. Madison's perfect world didn't just crack. It shattered into pieces so small that no amount of designer glue could put it back together. The first domino fell 3 days after the confrontation. I was at work administering medication to a patient when my phone lit up with a call from Emma at Grandview Estate. During my break, I listened to her voicemail. Lucy, I shouldn't be calling, but I thought you should know. Madison's wedding has been canceled. Your parents came in this morning demanding their deposit back, but contracts don't work that way. They got very upset. Security had to escort them out. $30,000 gone just for the venue. The calls started coming fast after that, vendors reaching out because they knew I was the responsible sister. The florist was owed $12,000, the caterer $25,000, the designer who'd been creating Madison's custom dress $15,000. Each call revealed another piece of my parents' financial house of cards collapsing. Nathan and I had decided to proceed with our own wedding plans, ignoring the family drama as much as possible. We met with the park coordinator to finalize details, confirmed our simple catering order, and sent invitations to the people who actually mattered to us. My nursing colleagues had rallied around me with touching support, offering to help with everything from decorations to day of coordination. You deserve this happiness, my supervisor Janet told me while helping me address invitations during a quiet night shift. After everything you've done for others, it's your turn. But even as I focused on building my future, the past kept intruding. 2 weeks after Preston's arrest, Madison appeared at the hospital during my lunch break. She looked like a different person. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She wore simple jeans and a t-shirt, her face bare and puffy from crying. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. We sat in the hospital cafeteria, the bustle of medical staff around us, a stark contrast to her stillness. For the first time in years, Madison looked vulnerable, human. Preston's been charged with identity theft, fraud, and embezzlement. She began, her voice barely above a whisper. His real name isn't even Preston. It's Gerald Hofstadter. He's been running this con in 3 different states. I stirred my coffee, unsure what response she wanted. Sympathy, I told you, so I settled for silence, letting her talk. The engagement ring was stolen. He took it from another woman he'd conned in Philadelphia. She identified it from police photos. I've been wearing another woman's heartbreak on my finger for months. The poetic justice of it wasn't lost on either of us. Madison had flaunted that ring at every opportunity, using it as proof of her superior worth. Now it was evidence in a criminal case. I'm testifying against him, she continued. The FBI says it will help with restitution, though they warned me not to expect much. Con artists are good at hiding assets. I'm sorry you're going through this, I said, finding I actually meant it. No one deserves to be deceived like that. Madison's laugh was bitter. Don't I? I was so horrible to you, Lucy. All those years of acting superior, of taking what was yours, of rubbing my privileges in your face. Maybe this is karma. Maybe it's just life, I offered. We all make choices. The important thing is what you choose next. She met my eyes then, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Respect. How are you so calm about everything I helped steal $60,000 from you? Because I learned something important. Money can be earned again. Time wasted seeking approval from people who don't value you, that's gone forever. I'm done wasting time. Madison nodded slowly. I got a job, a real one. Receptionist at a dental office. The pay is terrible and I'm on my feet all day, but it's honest work. I'm living with our cousin Sarah in Queens, sleeping on her couch until I can afford my own place. The transformation was remarkable. The princess was learning to be a person. Mom and Dad? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Madison's face darkened. That's actually why I'm here. Lucy, it's bad, really bad. Dad's been fired. The coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. What? The company found out about the embezzlement. He'd been skimming from client accounts to pay for my wedding. Small amounts he thought no one would notice, but Nathan's investigation triggered an internal audit. They found over $100,000 in misappropriated funds. The floor seemed to tilt. My father, who'd lectured me about responsibility my entire life, was a thief. Not just of my money, but of innocent clients who trusted him with their investments. He's facing criminal charges, Madison continued. Mom's had to get a job for the first time in 30 years. She's working at a grocery store. Can you imagine Mom checking groceries? I could, actually. And the image wasn't as satisfying as I'd thought it would be. It was just sad. They've listed the house for sale, Madison added. The mortgage, the equity loan, the legal fees, they can't afford any of it. Aunt Patricia said they'll probably have to declare bankruptcy. The family home where we'd grown up, where every holiday had been celebrated, where my parents had ruled their kingdom of appearances. Soon it would belong to strangers who'd never know about the dreams that died in that dining room. Have you spoken to them? I asked. They won't talk to me. They blame me for everything. Say if I hadn't wanted such an elaborate wedding, none of this would have happened. As if I held a gun to their heads and forced them to steal from you. The irony was sharp enough to cut. The golden child had become the scapegoat, bearing the weight of their collective greed. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Grandma Rose is here. She wants to take us to lunch. I looked at Madison, seeing not my entitled sister, but a broken young woman trying to rebuild. Do you want to come, Grandma's taking Nathan and me to lunch? Her eyes widened with hope before reality crashed back down. She said I wasn't welcome. That was before. This is now. People can change Madison. The question is whether you have. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm trying. I'm really trying. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm trying to become someone who might someday. I stood making a decision that surprised me. Come on, Grandma believes in second chances, but Madison, this is your only one. Don't waste it. We found Nathan and Grandma Rose in the hospital lobby, both looking surprised when they saw Madison trailing behind me. My grandmother studied her younger granddaughter with sharp eyes, taking in the humble clothes and genuine tears. Well, she said finally, you look like life has been teaching you some hard lessons. Yes, Grandma, Madison whispered. I'm sorry for everything. Sorry is a start. Living differently is what matters. Can you do that? I'm trying to learn how. Grandma Rose nodded slowly. Then you can join us for lunch, but you're buying your own meal. Time you learn the value of $1. Over sandwiches at a nearby deli, Madison shared more details about the family's downfall. Our parents had become pariahs in their social circle. Friends who'd eagerly anticipated Madison's society wedding now crossed the street to avoid association with scandal. The country club had revoked their membership. The church, where they'd been prominent members for decades, had suggested they seek spiritual counseling elsewhere. "They've lost everything," Madison said quietly. "Their money, their reputation, their home, their friends, even each other. I heard they're sleeping in separate rooms now, barely speaking." "They haven't lost everything," Grandma Rose corrected. "They threw it away. There's a difference. They had 2 daughters who would have loved them without the show, without the favoritism, without the lies. They chose glitter over gold and are now surprised to find their hands empty." Nathan, who'd been quiet throughout lunch, finally spoke. "Lucy and I have decided to put aside money for restitution to the clients your father stole from. Not because we have to, but because it's right. Those people didn't deserve to be victims of his choices." Madison stared at him in shock. "After everything they did to Lucy, you're helping clean up their mess." "We're helping innocent people," I clarified. "What our parents did to them was wrong, regardless of what they did to me." "I don't understand that kind of goodness," Madison admitted. "I don't think I have it in me." "Everyone has it," Grandma Rose said firmly. "It's a choice. Every day you choose who you want to be. Your parents chose poorly. You can choose better." After lunch, Madison hugged me for the first time in years. A real hug, not the air kisses we'd perfected at family gatherings. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me what real strength looks like." As she walked away, heading back to her receptionist job, I realized the family I'd known was truly dead. But from its ashes, something new might grow. Not the perfect family my parents had tried to project, but perhaps something more honest. The weeks continued to bring revelations. Preston, or rather Gerald, was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. The investigation revealed he'd defrauded 12 women across the country out of nearly $2 million. Madison was lucky. She'd only lost her dignity and some money. Others had lost their life savings. My parents' house sold at a loss, the proceeds barely covering their debts. They moved into a small apartment on the wrong side of town, the kind of place they'd once driven past with their windows up. Dad's former colleagues whispered about the charges he faced. Mom's arthritis made her grocery store shifts agony, but no one else would hire a 60-year-old woman with no work history. Through it all, Nathan and I continued planning our wedding. Simple flowers from Mrs. Patterson, a cake baked with love by the literacy program's cooking club, music provided by a quartet of nursing students I'd tutored. Every element chosen with care, paid for with our own money, celebrated by people who genuinely loved us. "No ice sculptures," Nathan teased one evening as we reviewed the final details. "Turns out ice melts," I replied. "I prefer things that last." 3 weeks before our wedding, I received an unexpected call. My mother, sounding nothing like the proud woman who'd dismissed me so easily. "Lucy," she began, then stopped. I could hear her crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I listened to her sob, feeling strangely detached. The woman who'd caused me such pain now sounded broken herself. "We destroyed everything," she continued. "Our family, our future, your trust. For what? For a party. For appearances, I see now how sick it all was. What do you want me to say, Mom?" "Nothing. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I finally understand. You were the successful one all along. You had love, integrity, purpose. We had nothing but empty show, and now we don't even have that." The call ended with her whispered apology and my silence. Some wounds cut too deep for words to heal. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt with simple sorry. As I prepared for my wedding, watching the family I'd known unravel completely, I realized something profound. They'd taken my money but given me something priceless in return, the knowledge of my own worth. I didn't need their approval, their favoritism, or their presence at my wedding. I had built a life of substance while they'd built one of smoke and mirrors. The unraveling was complete. From the ashes of their deception, I'd risen stronger, surrounded by genuine love, and heading toward a future built on truth. Sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you exactly who you don't want to be. 6 months after that explosive dinner, our wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring morning that felt like nature's blessing. Riverside Park had transformed overnight into a wonderland of wildflowers and twinkling lights, courtesy of the volunteers from the Literacy Center who'd arrived at sunrise to help set up. The same spot where Nathan and I had shared our first kiss now held rows of white folding chairs, facing a simple arch woven with jasmine and roses from Mrs. Chen's garden. I stood in the community center's small back room wearing my consignment shop dress that fit like it had been tailored for me. My nursing colleagues had taken turns doing my hair and makeup, their chatter and laughter filling the space with genuine joy. No professional stylists, no designer shoes, no magazine-worthy preparation suite, just real friends celebrating real love. "You look radiant," Janet said, adjusting my simple veil, like happiness personified. A knock at the door interrupted our preparations. My grandmother entered resplendent in her vintage blue suit, carrying a worn leather box. "Something borrowed," she said, opening it to reveal her own mother's pearl necklace. "These have seen 90 years of love loss and resilience. They belong around the neck of a granddaughter who embodies all three." As she fastened the pearls, she whispered, "Your grandfather would be so proud. You became everything we hoped for, not in spite of your challenges, but because of how you faced them." Through the window, I could see guests arriving. Nathan's colleagues from the tech world mingled with elderly students from the literacy program. My patients who'd become friends sat beside volunteers from the hospital. Each person there had touched our lives in meaningful ways. No obligation invites, no social climbing guests, no one attending just to judge the flower arrangements. "There's something else," Grandma Rose said, her eyes twinkling. "Madison is here. She asked permission to attend, promised to sit in the back, and leave if you wanted. But Lucy, you should see her. She's different." I moved to the window and spotted my sister near the back row. She wore a simple sundress, her hair in a ponytail, helping an elderly guest to their seat. No spotlight seeking, no dramatic entrance, just quiet assistance where needed. The change was remarkable. She can stay, I decided. Everyone deserves a chance to witness what real love looks like. As the ceremony time approached, one of Nathan's friends approached the makeshift changing room. "There's been a slight change in plans," he said, barely containing his excitement. Nathan arranged a surprise. Before I could ask what the opening notes of Pachelbel's canon filled the air, played not by our volunteer quartet, but by a full string ensemble, professional musicians who'd appeared as if by magic, their music transforming the park into a concert hall. How I asked, stunned. "Nathan wanted something special for your walk down the aisle," his friend explained. "He said you'd sacrificed enough. This one moment should be everything you dreamed." As I made my way to the ceremony site, I passed Madison, who was openly crying. She mouthed, "Beautiful," and pressed her hand to her heart in what looked like genuine emotion, not performance. The aisle stretched before me, lined with people who'd shown me what family really meant. Mrs. Chen beamed from her wheelchair, fumbling with her tablet to video call her granddaughter as promised. The nursing students I'd tutored held handmade signs saying, "Best mentor ever." My patients waved and blew kisses, their faces bright with shared joy. But it was Nathan who took my breath away. He stood at the altar in a simple gray suit, but he might as well have been wearing armor for how strong and protective he looked. His eyes never left mine as I walked toward him, and in his gaze, I saw our entire future reflected back at me. "You made it even more perfect," I whispered when I reached him. "You deserve perfection," he replied, "every single day for the rest of your life." The ceremony itself was everything we'd wanted, personal, meaningful, and authentic. We'd written our own vows, speaking promises that came from the heart rather than tradition. Lucy, Nathan began, his voice strong and clear. You taught me that wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the lives we touch. You showed me that true beauty comes from kindness, that real strength is in service to others. I promise to support your dreams, celebrate your victories, and remind you every day that you are always enough, more than enough. You are my treasure, and I vow to spend my life proving worthy of the gift of your love. Through my tears, I spoke my own truth. Nathan, you saw me when others looked past me. You valued what others dismissed. You protected me while respecting my independence, loved me without trying to change me. I promise to build our life on the foundation of honesty we've created, to face whatever comes with you beside me, and to never forget that the greatest fortune I ever received was the day you walked into my coffee shop. You are my home, and I vow to make our life together a shelter for all the love we have to give. As we exchanged rings, simple bands we'd chosen together, I noticed movement in the back rows. My parents stood at the edge of the gathering, not trying to enter, just watching from afar. They looked older, smaller somehow, their designer clothes replaced with off-the-rack basics. My mother clutched my father's arm as if afraid she'd blow away without anchor. I met their eyes briefly, seeing a mix of regret, longing, and something that might have been understanding. Then I turned back to Nathan, choosing my future over my past. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant declared, and Nathan's kiss was a promise sealed with joy. The reception that followed was everything Madison's never could have been: genuine, warm, and filled with laughter. The community center had been transformed with paper lanterns made by the literacy program's craft club and centerpieces created from wildflowers picked that morning. The food was potluck style with dishes from a dozen different cultures representing our diverse chosen family. During dinner served on mismatched plates that somehow looked perfect together, Nathan stood to make an announcement. Lucy doesn't know this yet. He began, grinning at my surprised expression. But her colleagues at the hospital helped me arrange something special. Lucy, honey, remember how you've always talked about wanting to create a support program for families of long-term patients. I nodded, confused about why he was bringing this up now. Well, the Nathan and Lucy Foundation is now officially registered as a nonprofit. We're starting with $1 million endowment to provide respite care counseling and financial assistance to families dealing with medical crisis. And the board has already voted on its first director. Congratulations, Mrs. Director. The room erupted in cheers as I sat stunned. My dream, the one I'd thought would take decades to achieve, handed to me wrapped in love and tied with community support. When did you? I couldn't form complete sentences. Your nursing friends are very persuasive, Nathan laughed, and extremely efficient at paperwork. Turns out when you spend years helping others, they're eager to help you back. As the evening progressed, there were more surprises. The literacy program presented us with a scrapbook filled with letters from every student I'd ever taught, telling stories of how learning to read had changed their lives. The hospital staff had pooled resources to give us a honeymoon. Neither of us had dared dream about 2 weeks in New Zealand, a place I'd mentioned wanting to visit once during a break room conversation years ago. This is too much, I protested, overwhelmed by the generosity. No, Janet said firmly. This is exactly what you deserve, what you've always deserved. The difference is now you're surrounded by people who see your worth. As the reception continued, Madison approached hesitantly. She'd stayed throughout the ceremony and dinner, helping serve food and clean up spills without being asked. The transformation was complete. The princess had become a person. Lucy, she said quietly, I wanted to give you something. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but... She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten letter. I've been saving every penny from my job, she explained. It's not much compared to what was taken, but it's a start. I'll pay back every dollar, even if it takes me 20 years. I looked at the check, then at my sister. The amount represented months of minimum wage work, foregone meals, sacrificed comforts. It was worth more than the $60,000 that had been stolen because it represented real change, real accountability. "I don't need your money, Madison," I said gently. "What I need is a sister, a real one. Can you be that?" She nodded through her tears, and for the first time since childhood, we hugged with genuine affection. The evening's most poignant moment came when Grandma Rose stood to give a toast. At 92, she commanded the room with quiet dignity. I've lived long enough to see fortunes made and lost families rise and fall, love bloom and wither. But tonight I've witnessed something rarer than wealth integrity, rewarded kindness, celebrated and true love recognized. Lucy and Nathan, you've built something that can't be bought or stolen, a life of meaning surrounded by people who value what matters. May your marriage be as rich in joy as you've made all of our lives. As the reception wound down, Nathan and I stood outside looking up at the stars barely visible through the city's glow. My parents had left without trying to approach, but they'd left a card with the security guard. Inside, in my mother's shaky handwriting, "We pray someday you can forgive us. Until then, know that we finally understand what we lost. Be happy." "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" Nathan asked, reading the note over my shoulder. "Maybe someday," I admitted, "when the healing is complete. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean giving them power to hurt me again." As we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, surrounded by friends still celebrating, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. 6 months ago, I'd sat in my childhood dining room watching my father give away my future. What I hadn't understood then was that he was actually setting me free. Free from seeking approval that would never come. Free from accepting less than I deserved. Free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my family for generations. In trying to destroy my dreams, they'd cleared the path for something better than I'd ever imagined. "Thank you," I told Nathan as we climbed into the car decorated with flowers and well wishes. "For what?" "For seeing me, the real me, and for showing me I was worth so much more than they told me." He kissed me softly. "You were always worth everything. I just held up the mirror until you could see it too." As we drove away toward our new life, I thought about the threads that weave our stories. My parents had chosen threads of appearance and favoritism, creating a tapestry that unraveled at the first test. Nathan and I had chosen threads of truth, kindness, and mutual respect, weaving something that would last a lifetime. The greatest irony, in losing my wedding fund, I'd gained something priceless. The knowledge that real wealth isn't what's in your bank account, but who stands beside you when the banks are empty. And by that measure, I was the richest woman alive. To everyone watching who's ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or told you were worth less than others, remember this: your value doesn't come from their recognition. It comes from who you are, what you do, and how you love. Don't let anyone convince you to accept less than you deserve. What defines your worth? Is it others' opinions or your own actions? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming adversity and finding your true worth. Share this with someone who needs to remember they're valuable just as they are. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you always recognize your own worth and surround yourself with those who see it too. Remember, sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they are, because it frees you to become exactly who you're meant to be.